WWE 2K22 has come out with brand new hands-on gameplay. A lot of it looks super exciting, but there is some stuff that has fans a little bit disappointed. Let's talk about that right now. Everybody, welcome back to Assemble. I'm Matt. Great to have you here on the show. We are talking 2K22. A lot of awesome creators out there have had the chance to get hands-on with an early build of 2K22. We've seen matches between Brock Lesnar and R-Truth. We've seen Roman Reigns versus Finn Balor. I'm going to do another episode talking about impressions of the gameplay, but today we are going to talk about something that has a lot of fans out there feeling a little bit disappointed, feeling that they are not getting what they had hoped for, and we're talking about MyGM mode. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, is to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below right now. I want to have the conversation with all of you. What do you think about the MyGM mode, what we saw from 2K? What's missing for you? Is there anything missing? Are you happy with it? Do you feel indifferent about it because it's not a mode you're even interested in? But I want to hear from all of you and get your thoughts on it. And we're going to summarize kind of a lot of people's feeling about what they saw so far. Not just myself, but just a lot of people out in the community and where people are coming from with all of this. Now, I want to start things off with the good, because we want to make sure we're being balanced here, right? That we're looking at both sides of the coin. So let's look at the positives and let's look at the things that are cool with MyGM. Based on the hands-on preview that we all saw online, I gotta say I like how the layout is of the whole thing and how it is structured. The actual bones of this thing, the way the aesthetics are, the graphics, the way all the menus are, it's clean, it looks polished, it looks easy to navigate through. That stuff is good for players. That is gonna get people to easily and quickly flip through menus, adjust their roster, draft, actually go through and change ratings and all this different stuff. I think the menu wise and going through all of it, it's not cumbersome, it's not overly complicated, and that's a really good thing. We have to remember, we got a ton of new players and new people that are coming in that have never played a GM mode, that are casual WWE 2K fans that just want to pick up the wrestling game and have a couple of matches with Brock and Roman, and maybe they're going to try out this MyGM mode and see what it's all about. Might not even be for some people out there, because they're saying, I have no interest in doing like a management system thing. I want to play the actual game. I do like too that we can actually see a comparison between how Raw performed versus SmackDown, or you could have NXT versus NXT UK, and you get to see after that week how each brand performed, yours and the AIs, and who had a better week. That stuff's good because it's going to give you some competition built in there. And if you are doing local couch co-op for this mode, that's going to be a lot of fun for players. That couch co-op element, you and your buddy to sit down and manage your rosters side by side, that's a really awesome feature. The show logistics piece, that's also a really cool element to all of this. Not only for updating your arenas and the environment itself, adding signs, advertising, all of that. I like the hook that they are introducing here and the progression of unlocking different arenas and progressing as you go. So like we've seen in here where you've got week 5, 9, and 11 to be unlocked for bigger shows, for bigger arenas, more capacity, ticket prices go up and so on. That's a good like carrot that's dangling out there to progress through the system, to feel like you're working for something. Because a lot of us, I think, have had the concern that, oh, why am I starting off in a high school gym with this huge WWE roster and I gotta work my way up? Why can't I just start off in SmackDown? Doesn't make any sense. I kind of get what 2K is trying to do here. By having that progression system of unlocking, you are working towards something. Because if we just start off in SmackDown or Raw, you're removing that element completely. Now, you could have done something else maybe where you're unlocking pay-per-views and pay-per-view arenas, or something element to do with house show arenas. You could have done it on that way, but I kind of get that progression system and I do like it. And the other thing, like viewership and show notes, the social media aspect, the feedback from fans, the feedback from the commissioner, Triple H, the game, all of that I think is really cool integration that's going to help you kind of progress through your MyGM experience. Those are all really cool wins. The interactions with superstars through the chat, unlock and grab legends or free agents on your roster, release superstars from their contracts. There's a lot of good in there to work with that's gonna make the mode a lot of fun. But there are some pieces in here that I think fans are feeling is disappointing and that the mode is lacking. So let's discuss that. So one of the key things that is noticeable here is that the mode itself feels a little bare bones. It feels like the ground level of a mode that has a lot of potential to grow in years to come, assuming it's successful, assuming fans are engaging with it as a game mode, and 2K wants to evolve it and add more down the road. Some of the pieces that are missing, and one of the glaring things that stood out to me, and I think stood out to a lot of people, was the limited roster available to draft. Titles are not accessible. So we have our 3 matches we can have on our standard show, 4 matches on a pay-per-view, 5 matches available for WrestleMania. And as we got through the full hands-on demo that we all saw, you're only able to select your main event title, like the Universal title or WWE Championship, and the women's title. We only get 2 titles to select from in this game mode. So not only were fans feeling that only having 3 matches available to do on a regular basis, on a week-to-week basis, was limiting, but we also found out that we can't include a US title, intercontinental title, any tag titles. Like, we don't get to have any of that within this game mode. So that's one, I think, big disappointing feature that was really missing, and I'm left scratching my head as to why 2K didn't want to include that in the game mode. The limited roster is another thing, is that we're only having like 8 rounds of the draft. We're only getting a roster of like 10 superstars made available to us. And again, a very limiting experience that's gonna hinder it and not give you a ton of replay value, because as you go through 50 weeks of your roster, you have probably done every single matchup. Now, keep in mind, we'll draft legends, we'll release superstars, contracts end, we'll do all of that stuff so that we can freshen up our roster as we go. But if you want to have long-term booking, if you're trying to set up storylines and story arcs in this mode, it does feel very limiting that you're only going to be able to do it so many times, on top of the fact that you can't fight for other titles. So one of the things that's, again, left me scratching on my head and feeling concerned about the mode is that I can't go in and create these rivalries between superstars where it's gonna have any incentive or just matter. Having additional titles in there makes it feel like they're fighting towards something, and then that's kind of what you want for a simulator experience. If I want to create MyGM and have AJ Styles versus Finn Balor in this mode, it may not even be a matchup that the CPU, that the AI is gonna give me good results for. We'll talk about that in a second. But I can't even have this for a respective title other than the main title. Now, I can select who I want my champion to be for the men's and the women's side as I start my GM mode, which is cool, but I'm just left wondering why we can't have additional titles in there, especially when you get into like a pay-per-view of 4 matches. 1 match is going to be for men's title, 1 match is going to be for women's title, so then I'm left with 2 matches. If they're not fighting for other titles, they're just kind of whatever, aren't they? And going through a lot of the hands-on experience from other creators that I've watched over the last like 48 hours, hearing them talk about it, they're sharing similar experiences. And one of the things that was noted, and we can go and check out great creators like Smack Talks and Delzinski and a bunch of others, one of the things that they did point out was creating matchups that you want are not going to necessarily turn into good ratings draws and give you good star ratings and give you more money and advance your MyGM experience and have you maybe even win that week in the ratings. What I mean is, if you set up a match between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, 2 powerhouses, that matchup, based on the system that 2K and Visual Concepts have created, that doesn't necessarily going to mean that I'm going to get good results and get good ratings, which is kind of odd, because you have 2 just very, very high rating superstars. But the way that the system has been built, from the looks of it and from what everyone is saying, it's about creating different matchups that are going to be working for the AI and the system that they've built. So like, I'm gonna have Roman Reigns versus a Finn Balor who's a lighter weight class, matchups that you don't necessarily want to even have. Now, on top of that, from what we have seen and heard from the hands-on beta, is that if you decide to go into the match and you have the options, right, of being able to simulate it, so the computer will just decide who the winner and loser is going to be. You can actually go in there as your GM and spectate the match, which I think is very cool. Different camera angles. It's going to allow for different share options. I like the spectate mode, and you can interfere in there, so that's a win. But then you can play the match. But here's the thing. If I want that Brock Lesnar Roman Reigns match, 2 powerhouses, 2 big men slapping meat, going in there, taking each other down.
Big meaty men slapping meat.
I want a certain outcome. I want Brock to beat Roman. That's not necessarily going to result in a good rating, which is going to have players having their head scratched going, but I wanted to progress the story this way, and I think it's going to actually do better numbers, better results for me, and it turns out it doesn't. And it's the way that the system has been built from the sounds of it that is going to create that limiting aspect to you. So even having that type of matchup isn't necessarily going to result in something good for you for your ratings and for your show progression. So even on the women's side, you may want Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch, but that might not result in a good matchup. You might want to do Bianca versus Dana Brooke or Nikki Ash, and that might be okay, but it's also not the story you're trying to tell. So it's a limiting aspect and feature that, again, I think is getting players concerned that it's going to be a little disappointing. And I know for a lot of people that have been commenting out there about what they were hoping to see and hoping to get from MyGM mode, I want to be optimistic and say, hey, this is an early build that people have gotten a preview of. Maybe it's not the full thing. 2K has the showcase coming up with IGN, the game's coming out soon. Maybe it's going to get patched, and maybe it'll get updated, and maybe there are certain features that are not fully unlocked in there. It seems like it is the full final build. It's the thing that they wanted creators to get their hands on and actually preview, so I imagine this is the final product. One thing that I can be hopeful and optimistic for is that they hear players' feedback on this mode. They're passionate about it. They want to see it be strong and successful. Maybe they can make some tweaks and adjustments to give players maybe a better hook or feel like it's a little bit more fleshed out and less restrictive. One thing, and I don't know if it's going to be difficult or not, would be to add more title matches and title options within the game mode. And I guess the other thing that people are worried about is just the lack of replayability when it comes to MyGM. If I do a 15 or a 50 week mode for myself and for the superstars that I have, and I've unlocked everything and progressed, I wonder what the hook is going to be for people to come back in and replay the mode a second and a third and fourth time, other than just maybe trying to switch brands and GMs. Because a mode like this, a management simulator mode, is at its core, you're trying to be able to have that kind of like endless hook of going in there and drafting and doing trades and managing roster and logistics. You want to feel like you are building this thing out and it's gigantic and that you have a lot more hands-on control. And again, we'll wait and see. We'll get the game ourselves and then we'll be able to play it, and then maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised by a lot of it. So is MyGM going to disappoint fans? Maybe. Everyone's gonna have an opinion, and maybe it's gonna work really well, and maybe it's not for others. I can't wait to get my hands on it to just experience it and see if it has that replayability hook that I'm looking for in this mode. And maybe the devs will be able to do some patches and updates if it's missing a few things. But right now, I think that if fans are feeling disappointed, and if you're feeling slightly disappointed by this, I think it's totally valid. And I think it's a valid critique of 2K and Visual Concepts when we look at, like, well, we've had 2.5 years of development. The game had been delayed to, theoretically allow for more development time. This feels like a base of a mode that they want to be able to build upon in the future. And that's great. But I think fans would feel like they would feel happier if they were getting something that was more flushed out, instead of potentially feeling like they gotta wait until next year's game to get what they really want. Let me know what you think. Is MyGM mode disappointing based off of what we have seen and heard so far? Stay tuned for more episodes, because we'll have the IGN coverage and that post-show, and we'll be able to go through and give you all of our thoughts and analysis on that. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.